Good anyway. Hi, everybody. All right, welcome back to Act 2 of Folkwise as it was. We're here with first of our interviews, and we want to do this. Try to do this on have this as like a regular format for these live streams where we do play a video game for a couple hours, Hades or otherwise, and then uh, sit down with a folklorist or maybe even a folk artist sometimes and talk to them. Try to get that. Try to find a video game that can get them to talk about how this video game builds on folklore or how this people use folklore to play this video game. But then in this section, we just want to pick people's brains, as it were, and really talk about folklore with them. So, like I said, we have Dr. Kristina Downs from the Crimelore Podcast. Her camera's not. Couldn't get the camera working, but we have this picture. Kristina, can you confirm that is what you look like?
That is what I look like.
Great. Okay.
And I look exactly like that right now.
At all times. At all times, you look like that.
Mm-hmm. Especially during this pandemic, I always look.
That's a particularly good hair day too.
Yep.
All right. I'm gonna and hey everyone, giving you a peek behind the curtain. Daisy, I'm gonna give you I'm just gonna say, can you be collect? If anyone asks Kristina a question in the chat, can you collect it? Because my Google Doc is kind of over the area where I can see the chat right now.
Absolutely, and we've already got a great question in the chat for us later too, in the more formal Q&A at the end of our Folkwise show. So I'm collecting questions
Beautiful.
for Dr. Kristina Downs for us at different parts of the night. If you want to send us a question, you can send it to folkwise13@gmail.com, or you can post it in the chat, and I'll try to hide it from Dom so he can be surprised by the question later.
That's what I'm saying. I'm not looking right now. I'm not looking for like the next hour. So
Cool.
Feel free to surprise
send
me.
us your questions.
All right, Kristina.
Yes.
So we learned a little bit about who you are and what the Crimelore Podcast is in the last segment, but let me ask you this question. So you have like a sort of a folklore podcast, but it's kind of a true crime adjacent podcast. Would you agree?
Yes.
Okay. So this is a two-part question. What is the true crime podcast that got you into true crime podcasts? And what is the folk narrative that got you into legends?
Ooh. Those are good questions. So, just very briefly, my history as a true crime aficionado, which I won't deny at this point that I am one, it kind of took an unusual route because I think, well, clearly most true crime fans get interested because they're interested in the true crime. I got interested in what was going on true crime forums before I actually got interested in the true crime itself. I'm one of those people that gets very easily freaked out by stories about crime. I've never been that freaked out by the supernatural, but crime definitely freaks me out.
I'm the same way.
And so, like I can watch, I don't really necessarily like horror movies, but I can watch horror movies and go straight to bed and have no problem. But like a lot of procedurals will leave me shaken up. Because I feel like, stories about ghosts, they're usually localized to one building. And if I don't live in that building, I don't need to worry about them. Whereas murderers could be anywhere. So anyway, I think the first true crime-ish podcast I listened to was one called Thinking Sideways, which was an unsolved mystery podcast, some of which were crimes, some of which were kind of supernaturally things. It no longer exists. Where did I go from there? And then the first I guess like a lot of people, I listened to Serial also. It's probably the first one that was a definite hardcore true crime podcast that I listened to. And then I think I went into Up and Vanish. So I started with other than Thinking Sideways, which was very much the 1 week, one mystery, I started with the long form podcasts. So I went from Serial to Up and Vanished, which is the first season was about the Terry Grimstead case in Georgia. And then they did Crystal Reisinger, is that her name, in Colorado? They, went through a series of, basically did one case per season. And now I listen to a lot of that, and it's half research and half entertainment
Yeah.
at this point. So in terms of legends that got me into legends, see, that's been a thing I've been interested in since I was a wee tiny one. So um, I had my sister talked to my mother, and I don't know if you guys remember because you guys are a little younger than me. There were these Time Life books that were like black spines, but then had a lot of times like holographic covers that were like mysteries of the unknown. And there was like one would be on ghosts, and one of them would be on the Bermuda Triangle, and so I remember reading all of those. The first legend I remember hearing was what I think I would classify it as a variant of the boyfriend's death. But so for anyone who doesn't know, the boyfriend's death is the legend where a couple is out. They're either parking or their car breaks down, depending on the variation. And the guy goes to go get help. The woman is left alone in the car. He tells her to lock the doors and don't let anybody in. And during the night, she hears weird scratching noises on the top of the car. And in the morning, the police come and tell her, come with us, but don't look back. And she, of course, looks back, because anytime there's an interdiction to not do something in a legend, people are going to break it. And she looks back to see her boyfriend hanging over the car, and it was either his fingernails or his shoes that was scratching through. The variation I heard, the boyfriend, he must have been in the story at some point. Again, I heard this when I was like 9, so I don't remember all of the details of how I heard it at the time. It's been a long time since I was 9. But the variation that I heard was that the scratching noise was that the killer was on top of the car trying to scratch through the roof with his fingernails. And the kind of reveal spooky thing at the end was the cops telling her afterwards that there was only 1 millimeter of like metal left between her and the murderer. He would have gotten to her somehow or another through scratching through the roof of the car.
Wow.
So I don't know if that's like the one that really got me into it, but I was always really interested in supernatural legends, especially. I think ghosts were really my favorite from, most of my youth.
Sure. Wow, good. So we talked a little bit about what the show is about earlier, but here's a theme I picked up while I was listening to the show. There's this kind of running theme that goes through the show that people have a fear of the unknown, even though it's the known that tends to kill people. Can you explain to the viewers out there what that kind of means in relation to the narratives you talk about on your show?
Sure. So probably the most classic example I could give you is the poison Halloween candy legend, where there's some kind of malevolent stranger that either because they're a Satanist or just because they're evil or whatever is either poisoning Halloween candy or putting razor blades in Halloween candy. And the truth is that every known instance of something like that, it has actually been someone really close to the child, either a parent or a family member of some kind who has tampered with the candy.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't have to worry about the stranger down the street handing out candy. It's your parent that's going to kill you, or your significant other that's going to kill you. It's not the stranger lurking in your backseat. Although apparently strangers do actually lurk in people's backseats. But you are much more likely to be killed by your intimate partner than by a stranger. And in that way, crime narratives are actually very different from legend. I read a really interesting article in some major publication. And it was a classic, like someone who doesn't know folklore trying to bring in folklore, but they made a comment about, at their heart, fairy tales are true crime stories. Hansel and Gretel is just a true crime story. And as I see you're making the kind of the same expression I made there, Don. No, fairy tales are not true crime stories because, as folklorists know, fairy tales are not presented as truth.
Yeah.
So they're not true. There might be crime in there, but it's not true crime. And there might be, one of my professors used to say there's truth in all stories, and that's very true. There are. Yes.
Well, then that I
parents
agree
really did
with.
abandon their kids in the woods, so
Yeah.
that part of Hansel and Gretel definitely lines up.
That's a good way of phrasing what that's supposed to be getting at. Yeah.
Where I see the biggest overlap between fairy tales and true crime, which is kind of a contrast between legends and true crime, is that legends usually do frame the danger as something kind of remote. It's the stranger, it's the, whatever. Fairy tales kind of tell the truth about it's the person close to you that's actually dangerous. It's your father who's going to sell you to Satan. It's your stepmother that's going to tell a hunter to cut your heart out.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of terrifying. And, it's interesting that fairy tales are kind of honest about that in a way that legends are not.
Yeah.
Huh. And these are broad sweeping generalizations, obviously.
No, but that was the used to good ends, though. I liked how you answered that. Another kind of like I think maybe it would even be called like your official tagline on the podcast is ostension happens.
Yes.
Explain what ostension is.
So ostension is basically someone consciously acting out a folk narrative, generally a legend. So this would be the killer in the backseat hiding in someone's backseat because they have heard the legend of the killer in the backseat. You get into also, there's all these kind of sub-genres. There's like semi-ostension and quasi-ostensions.
What do those mean? Because I totally remember, but remind anyone else.
You're asking me this late in the evening, and I'm going to probably mix them up. But
okay.
Quasi-ostension is when you interpret something based on something that happens based on your knowledge of a legend. So a story that I tell in one of the podcast episodes is getting in my car and smelling a man's cologne and being absolutely convinced that there was a man hiding somewhere in my car. And it turned out it was just the weird smelling hand soap that Jesse Fivecoat had at his house at the time. But I smelled the smell that I knew was not associated with me.
Yeah.
Or should not have been associated with me, and was just, convinced that because I knew this legend about men hiding in women's cars, that had to be the source of it. Quasi-ostension. I don't remember what the distinction between semi-ostension is.
But
semi-ostension might be when it's like there's no proof that someone hiding in someone's car and like someone basically acting out a legend, but there's no evidence that they know about the legend. So again, we can kind of interpret it through that frame, but they don't know. That might be it. I may be getting that wrong. Somewhere there's some legend scholars screaming at me going, no, that's not what it is.
As a legend person, I think you're right.
Oh, thank God.
I was going to say, person who also does ostension stuff, I think you're right. And there's also like a distinction between acting and ostension. Like if you know that you're pretending like on stage to be something you're not, or like another actor on stage is acting out their death, you don't literally think that they died. That's part of it as well. Where acting does not equal ostension. You have to kind of like believe the thing that you assume from the data around you.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. So you have to like believe that the smell that you smelled in the car could be a person in the back seat or somebody who you didn't know was in your car, even though the reality was not that, or that it's a very unlikely claim, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm. All right. And you kind of touched on this earlier, but I think let's just dive into it. So, you were talking about that your way into true crime and specifically true crime podcasts were these online groups. And I think I want to ask this, especially with the story in the news recently about the Zodiac killer, his cipher getting one of his ciphers getting solved. What is your take, both as like a true crime buff and a folklorist, about citizen crime solvers?
So most of the time I'm pretty optimistic about it. I think there's a lot of really great potential that can happen there. We've seen some exciting things happen. I think one of the most recent high profile things has been the Zodiac cipher, but then where there's been a lot of success has been in identifying unidentified bodies,
Mm.
which isn't necessarily in this case solving crimes, but it's kind of giving families closure. And there's been one of the big high profile ones there was called what was called the Grateful Doe case. It was a young man who'd been killed in a car accident. It's believed that the driver fell asleep at the wheel. Is no crime involved, but the young man was a hitchhiker who he'd picked up, and there were no clues to his identification. He didn't have any ID on him. He had a note in his pocket addressed to someone named Jason, and he had some Grateful Dead tickets. And those were the only clues to his identity.
Wow.
And my understanding is it started with Grateful Dead fan communities on the internet sharing his sketch and going, hey, this guy was one of us. Let's see what we can find out. And then sooner or later, people started coming up with pictures that definitely looked like going, hey, I know that guy. I don't remember his last name, but his first name was Jason, and he was in this place at this time, and here's his picture. And eventually, the man's mother saw the photo and recognized her son,
Oh,
who'd
wow.
been missing for 20 years.
Wow.
And, obviously that's not necessarily the outcome the family was hoping for, but it does at least give them some closure, and it gives this young man back his name. And so there's been some really, very moving, kind of heartwarming stories. There are also cases where it goes horribly wrong.
Mhm.
And probably the most famous example that I could give there was in the wake of the Boston Marathon bombing,
Yeah.
when police released images of the suspects. It actually started on Twitter with someone saying, hey, I went to high school with this guy and he's missing, and I think that one of them is him. And it turned out that that was a Brown University student who was indeed missing, but had nothing to do with the Boston Marathon bombing, and in fact had died from suicide. And in the meantime,
Oh my God.
between when his name got thrown out there on the internet and when they actually figured out A, who the actual culprits were, and B, what had happened to him, his family had gotten death threats, and so this family who's in the midst of this horrible loss is now dealing also with having their lives threatened because the people on the internet misidentified someone. So there's good and bad potential. I was talking with another scholar over the summer, and she said, I always think about it as, what would the worst person in the world do with this? And when you think about that, that's a really terrifying thing. What I will say I have seen is not the worst person in the world. What I mostly see are people that genuinely want to help. And it's kind of heartwarming in the midst of reading about all of these terrible things to see people using their own free time. And, you'll see someone post about, hey, my grandmother was killed at such and such place, and we never got the full story on what happened. And someone will immediately post, hey, I work near the courthouse in that town, and I'm happy to go over on my lunch break if there's any records you want me to pull. And so it's, there's something very heartwarming about seeing people just totally willing to give of their own free time with nothing to gain from it.
Yeah.
I also think that they're, in a day and age where there's a lot of very rightful critique of official law enforcement, we could think about some possibilities to providing counter narratives and removing the center of power there into other places. But of course, when you're dealing with internet forums, it could be anybody.
Yeah.
So I think there's some really great potential. I think there are some obvious downsides, and people need to think about how to guard against those kind of things. And I don't pretend I have all the answers.
That's a fair admission. No, but that was a good answer. That was a good answer.
I thought I might pop in and say that we've got plenty of questions in the chat for at any point if you want to take a moment.
I got a few more things I want to get to, and then we can definitely get to questions. But I got four more questions here, and then we're gonna get to our special activity we have planned, and then we can do questions after that.
That sounds fabulous.
Cool. So I guess the questions get sillier from here on out, Kristina. All right. So One of your episodes, you talked about the babysitter and the killer upstairs. Is that like what that legend is normally called?
I believe so.
Made famous by the movie When a Stranger Calls.
Yes.
It's very interesting because listening to that episode made me realize it's one of these moments where you realize I now know what that thing I now know that funny thing I heard was a parody of this original thing. Where I heard the parody first before I got back to it. So I'd like to. Do you know this parody of the killer upstairs? That is a. Oh man, I think I might have found the original 4chan post, which is from 2008. Do you know where I'm going with this?
I don't.
All right, so I want to ask you a little bit about it goes a little bit with your episode on dark humor, but I want to ask you about parodies of these crime legends. But first, if I may, because you start every episode with a live reading of an urban legend, I'd like to hit you with a live reading of this internet urban legend parody that I have heard for 10 years. You ready?
Yes.
So you're with your honey and you're making out when the phone rings. You answer it and the voice goes, "What are you doing with her?" You tell your girl and she say, "What?" Then he call and say, "What are you doing with my daughter?" Girl say, "My dad is dead." Then who was phone?
So I remember seeing the Who Was Phone.
I think I tried to find the earliest incarnation of Who Was Phone, because when you were doing that episode, I went, "Oh, this is what Who Was Phone is." I didn't know Who Was Phone was referencing anything.
So, you know where I thought you were going when you said a parody of that? It jogged in my mind a story that I remember my older siblings telling me when I was really little. And I think the story was called Bloody Finger, and it's somebody, and there's two variations of it, and one of them is like someone keeps calling and saying, Bloody Finger, 3 blocks away, and then it counts down, and then either they get to the door and they say, "All I wanted was a Band-Aid," or for some reason, the creepy person calling on the phone is talking to a baby, and I don't remember how that happened in the story, but it did. And when the creepy figure finally gets to the door, the baby says, "If you keep your bloody fingers, I'll keep my dirty diapers."
Whoa, okay.
Anyway, you get the creepy calling, the counting down, which you sometimes get in the babysitter.
That's right. That's right.
And I butchered that parody retelling there.
You know what? I didn't read Who Was Phone perfectly either. All right, these next three are questions I know the answer to, but I kind of just want to hear you say them for chat if you don't mind.
All right.
Okay, question number 1. Can you talk about the time you put a curse on your JV basketball team?
I think I only put a curse on one player on the JV basketball team, but so I was the one weird goth kid in my high school. It was the late 90s in the Bible Belt. And I, wore a lot of black velvet and painted a blood tear on my face and mixed white face paint in with my foundation, because as you can see from that photo there, what I clearly need to do is be paler than I actually am. It's definitely something I should devote time to. And lots of rumors grew up around this, and sometimes they get back to me, and I was really amused by the fact that people thought creepy things about me. Like, I remember one guy going, "Oh yeah, I heard it was because you saw your father killed when you were 5 years old." And I'm like, "No, my dad's still alive." But interesting story. So anyway, lots of people thought I was a witch, and I definitely cultivated that.
Okay.
And at one point, there was a guy who was on the basketball team who was also in my drama class, and he was being obnoxious in drama class and making fun of me and my friends. And I think I said "you are stupid" in sign language, because I thought it was really cool that I knew like 5 phrases at the time.
I didn't know this detail. Keep going.
And
oh my god.
So
he thought it was Doctor Strange or something?
I guess, I don't know. And so it was, I think, a couple weeks later that I was going, high school was 2 stories tall, and we had these staircases on the sides of the like wings that were really supposed to be fire escapes, but they didn't have alarms on them, and we all used them regardless, but they weren't that highly trafficked. And it was also during class. I had an early dismissal to get to a bus to go to a magnet school, which is a long story. But anyway, I'm going down the point is I'm going down the staircase, which is enclosed, and there's no one else around. And I'm met at the bottom of the staircase by 3 members of our JV basketball team. They were all taller than me. And the guy says, what was that thing? The guy from drama class says, what was that thing in drama class? And I said, I don't know what you're talking about. And he reminds me, and I'm like, oh yeah. I don't know what I said, but he said, so-and-so said that was a hex. I said that you were putting a hex on me. And in a rare moment of like, normally I'm the person that gets the great line 10 minutes after I needed it. But in a rare moment, I like actually had the line when I needed it. And I just looked at them and I said, no, to do that, I would have needed blood, lots of blood. And I just kind of pushed my way through them and walked out, and nobody bothered me. And it turned out that apparently he thought I had cursed him and that it was causing him to have a problem playing basketball. But they never bothered me again after that. So either they were convinced I wasn't a witch, or they were really convinced I was a witch. And either way, it worked out for me.
Bravo. Yeah, what an amazing...
Possibly the high point of my life.
Hey.
I peaked at 17.
Next question is not anything you were personally involved in, but it is sort of like a folkloric activity. Can you explain what Flaming Baghead is?
Yes. Flaming Baghead is a game that was played, I believe, mostly at the fraternities at my undergraduate institution, College of William and Mary, Park upon the Gale. And they literally would put paper bags on their heads and light them on fire and go around headbutting each other until, I don't know how the game ended, but I can't imagine it ended well.
Deep play. Oh my God.
And I know they would also sometimes, like when they had like cases of beer, use the like cardboard boxes from the beer.
Okay. And light them on fire. And light them on fire.
Understanding.
Oh yeah, how do you do that sober? And then last question I have right here. I don't know exactly what the preferred way of phrasing this is, so I'm going to defer to like the Disney World way of asking this. How many years have you known your friend, the great Sashenka?
I have known the great Sashenka since St. Patrick's Day 2003.
Wow.
And it's actually pronounced Sashenka.
Sashenka.
But,
okay.
She answers to Sashenka.
Oh, okay, good. We'll relay that on to her, that I apologize. And what does she do for a living?
That's all right. She is a slack rope walker and contortionist. And she has on occasion, but no longer eats fire.
Wow. Oh, wow. Awesome. Oh, I don't think I knew I don't think I knew about eating fire.
It was basically something I learned and maybe did twice, and then was like, I don't actually know that I want to do this.
Yeah, you or she learned. No, but you learned for this is at Renaissance fairs, correct?
So I actually learned so I got my start working at Colonial Williamsburg in a historic reproduction circus.
Yep.
And that's where I learned to eat fire from somebody who had learned to eat fire at Coney Island.
Oh, of course.
Was nearing retirement and wanted to pass the skill on, and I agreed to learn. Like I said, I learned, and I never got terribly good at it. I had exactly one trick.
Okay.
And it's just like, then you have to like, there's enough equipment involved in rope walking. And then you add on, then I have to also bring fuel and torches and a fire extinguisher,
Oh yeah.
and all of this to do one trick, which is kind of mediocre, and risk liver damage. And I just ultimately decided, yeah.
Wait, okay, just one follow-up. Why liver damage?
Because you're putting flammable material in your mouth. That's not good for you.
Yeah, okay, but I would have guessed stomach. I would have guessed stomach, but no, apparently liver. Wow.
Yeah, liver is what I mean, and obviously like there are catastrophic things that could happen. Like
Yeah.
if you inhale at the wrong moment, fire's going down your esophagus, and that's going to be very bad for you. But what you hear mostly, I mean, everyone's got a story about someone they know that got burned and, this and that. But mostly the like long-term things are, it's because, even if you're not, the fire breathing causes a lot more damage because you're putting a lot of the chemical in your mouth. But,
Sure.
fire eating, you're soaking the torches in that. Some of it's going to end up in your body. There's just no way for it to not end up in your body. And after time, it can build up. And
yeah.
I have known some people who've had ill effects, so I ultimately decided it just wasn't worth it. Since I wasn't good to begin with.
In the chat, Pies Kill Kings just said, now she just spits that Crimelore fire. All that fire's funneled into Crimelore.
All right, as promised, we have a quick activity that we want to play with Kristina. So this is Kristina, have you ever heard of tiermaker.com?
I have not.
All right, a tier list is a way of ranking who the best character is in a video game with multiple character choices, think like a fighting game. However, in the past couple of years, especially on Twitch, they have been used to rank all types of different things. I think most iconically, breakfast cereal, ways to eat your eggs, best NBA player. And so if you can still see my screen, correct?
Yes.
All right, so right now, I have created the Urban Legends from the Crimelore Podcast tier list maker. Now, as you may have noticed, it does say I with an exclamation point because apparently I would be breaking the terms of services for tiermaker.com if I was making a tier list of crimes. They don't want that. But if anyone asks, I swear I am doing... Urban Legends is featured on Kristina's podcast. Now, I have the 6 so far down here, and I want you to, if you could, tell me where I'll go to each one. Tell me where each one goes, and I'll have you rank them. It goes from S is the top, that is, best of the best. A tier, B tier, C tier, D tier. I didn't make an F tier because I don't think you think any of the Urban Legends, are F tier. But yeah, tell me. Let's go through this and try to figure out what is your favorite of the Urban Legends you've covered in your podcast, and that could mean, what was most fun for you to research, what you think has the most vitality in culture now or going forward, et cetera, et cetera. Does that sound good?
That sounds good.
All right, let's go to episode 1, which is going to be right here, which is the killer in the back seat, and I used the scene from the opening of the movie Urban Legend. You can see the axe. You can see the axe in the back there.
Yes.
So yeah. Where would you rank the killer in the back seat?
Okay, and are we doing this can I only have one per category?
No, you can double up. You can double up. If you double up, I will have you break a tie.
Okay. So Killer in the Backseat is probably one of my favorite Urban Legends, so I'm going to give that an S.
Oh, that's going straight to S tier. Well, that's why it was episode 1 of the podcast. That's why it was episode 1 of the podcast. Great. And what else can you say about why that ranks S tier for you?
So I think probably because that one had a really heavy impact in shaping my behavior for a lot of years, and probably still does to some extent. It's really great story. Got lots of action in it. It's really creepy. It's got that kind of near miss brush with danger. the last minute rescue. Obviously, there are things that when I really do an in-depth analysis of it, I don't love the female victim and all of those kinds of things. But
Sure.
It's one of my favorite stories.
Yeah, it's kind of got like a twist halfway through. It's great. Next, I found a comic, but of this legend, but it wouldn't shrink down to this size well, so I just went with a picture of a hairy arm. The next one is the hairy armed hitchhiker. Where are you putting the hairy armed hitchhiker?
I think I'm gonna give that a C.
Okay.
I feel like it's really kind of just the Diet Cola of the killer.
Yeah, sure. It doesn't have the twist of the trucker be flashing his lights trying to get your attention. It's just, how did you not notice old lady had hairy arms and maybe an arm tattoo?
Right.
Yeah, sure. I get it. The next episode was that La Llorona?
Yes, I believe so.
All right, so we've got the cover to the poster to the movie The Conjuring Presents The Curse of La Llorona. Where are you putting La Llorona on this list?
I feel like I also have to give La Llorona an S.
All right, but you got to...
One of the stories that got me into folklore studies. My first ever conference paper was on the La Llorona Got Milk ad.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Which I had never seen until your podcast.
Oh.
It's
a crazy commercial.
If you have to break the tie, what is the top of S tier? Is it Killer in the Backseat or La Llorona?
It's La Llorona.
Oh, we've got La Llorona screaming in the chat right now, actually.
Oh.
La Llorona, yeah, La Llorona crying out in the chat. Great. All right. Next is... Well, I don't have these written down. What was the next episode, Kristina?
I believe the next one was Poison Halloween Candy.
Poison Halloween Candy. Now, here's something that didn't come up with Poison Halloween Candy, but something I remember from Halloween 2001. My parents checked my candy for poison or nails or raisin blades because they were convinced Al-Qaeda was going to attack us through the candy that year in Halloween 2001. Where are you putting the poisoned Halloween candy?
I'm gonna give that a D.
Oh, that's a D. But then again, if I can kind of try to answer this for you, poison Halloween candy was your example of you fear the unknown when it's the unknown that harms you. So you kind of already called out that legend on stream already. So I understand.
Yeah.
Do you have anything else to add?
Can I just briefly make a side note about Halloween 2001?
Yeah. Oh, sure. Yeah.
Because the legend that I kept getting sent to me in the emails, because I was old enough to be getting emails in 2001.
Okay.
Was basically a variation of what we now call the Grateful Terrorists, but that a woman's boyfriend had disappeared. She had a Middle Eastern boyfriend who disappeared shortly before September 11th. And the last thing he'd said to her was, don't get on a plane on September 11th and don't go to a mall on Halloween.
Oh, wow.
Contacting her and telling her that he was one of the terrorists.
Don't go to a mall on Halloween. Oh, my God.
And I can tell you how seriously people were taking that legend.
Tell me.
That I was working a Halloween event for a theme park at the time. Where I was painted green and dressed as a witch. And it was not a great job. But people were stopping me. Like, people that were visitors to the theme park were randomly stopping people and saying, whatever you do, don't go to a shopping mall.
Oh, my God. That's new. This is new to me.
Were really buying into that. And
I don't.
It's
I think, I was in 7th grade, so I was just like only excited about like hitting Mr. Boland's house because he gave out king size candy bars. Like, we have to make it all the way down to Mr. Boland's house. Wow, that was great. All right.
I was also in Virginia, so I was nearer to the attack sites too. So
sure. And then next is the Babysitter and the Killer Upstairs, which we talked a little bit about earlier. I chose the original. I'm sorry. What?
Oh no, I was thinking you can continue.
Okay, I chose the original When a Stranger Calls movie poster because it actually has a landline and not the remake where you could just use a cell phone and you'd be fine. But Babysitter and the Killer Upstairs, Kristina, have you checked on the children?
I'm gonna give that one an A.
Obviously,
it's spawned a lot of pop culture variations. It's clearly a powerful legend.
It's true. And then last one, we have the Kidney Thief, and kind of similar to what I was saying with like who was phone. I can remember the Kidney Thief. The kidney theft being the punchline of that classic Charlie the Unicorn YouTube video. Before I had ever heard an urban legend about waking up with like lipstick on the mirror saying "Call 911, you're missing your kidneys." So I guess what I'm saying is I hear urban legends all backwards and wrong. But where are you going to put the Kidney Thief? And don't feel pressure to put B if it's not a B. You can have a gap.
Square for B.
Okay. So we're putting it right there. And why do you say this one belongs in B tier?
I think I'm good with that.
Okay. Someone in the chat is saying that they'd never go home with strangers because afraid that they will steal their kidneys, and that is that's something that kind of came up on your episode about the Kidney Thief. Well,
yeah. I mean, that's.
But what
definitely the warning there.
It's the warning there, but I'm thinking like it's like one of the few legends. The candy one, it's kind of kids, but like this one, it's all like violence done against women, and the Kidney Thief is the one where like men go, oh, I can't go home with a stranger because I might lose my kidneys. Like wow, finally men have something to be afraid about with strangers. Whereas,
because usually, especially when you get into anything related to sex, it's usually the women that have to pay. Like
exactly.
Usually, women are the ones that are responsible for. And my favorite Freudian slip that's happened so far in the podcast was when I said something about what women are afraid of when they go home with straight men, and what I meant to say was strange men.
I thought you meant to say straight men too, and then only when you started laughing, I'm like, oh, okay, well, didn't mean to.
But they both work. So yeah, I think women don't need another reason to be afraid of what could happen. Whereas maybe men need something to make them behave a little bit, I guess, in terms of if we're going to view legends as a form of social control. Sure.
All right, Daisy, I'm going to save this and like we can post this on Folkwise's social media. We can also like I don't know, maybe even put out the link too. But yeah, you have her here. Kristina Downs, host of the Crimelore Podcast, has ranked all of the urban legends so far. I didn't include the jokes from the Crimelore Podcast, and the champion of Crimelore as of this point is La Llorona. Is another legend going to come for the throne? You'll have to listen to Crimelore in order to figure that out. Kristina, thanks so much for playing the tier maker.
It was fun. Thank you.
Great. Daisy, are you there?
I sure am.
Daisy, I hear you've got... sorry. What are you going to say?
Well, I was going to say it's great that you ended making that point about La Llorona because we have a question about La Llorona.
Oh, hit me with hit Kristina with La Llorona.
Yeah, I've got a couple questions in the chat from both the chat, from our email, from all over the place for Kristina about true crime, podcasts, all kinds of stuff. So I guess I'll do the La Llorona one. But James sent us, I saw the episode that you did on La Llorona. Do you think you will do an episode on the Mexican cartel folk hero phenomenon?
Very possibly. I will admit that had not occurred to me, but it seems like a really great episode now that you bring it up. So
Wow.
There we go.
And,
James here for you. I guess that's not so
thanks,
much about
James.
La Llorona as it is about like Mexican folklore and
Okay.
crime.
Mm-hmm.
But close there. All right, you ready for
That's
another
all
one?
within my wheelhouse. So.
Yes. Yeah, perfect. It's all a good question for you.
Yeah.
Okay. I got another maybe quick question here. Do you know the Hound of the Baskerville? And if so, thinking about between true crime and the supernatural, what are your thoughts about it?
I mean, it's a Sherlock Holmes mystery, right? Is it?
Yes.
Does it exist beyond that?
Well, there are like sightings of like the black dog in England, right? Is that what that question's getting at?
There was not much more explanation to it, but I would guess yes.
Yeah, people often see like a ghostly dog and think it's like an ill omen in Britain. If I remember from a paper a student wrote once.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe
again, I am vaguely aware of that.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we can ask another question. Maybe we can simmer on it and come back to it.
What was part 2 of that question, Daisy?
The way it's written is between true crime and the supernatural. What are your thoughts on the Hound of the Baskerville? That's the whole question. So if you don't know it, that's okay.
I feel like I don't know it. I feel like I don't. Well, and also I only know the like Sherlock TV show's variation of, so I don't actually know the Sir Arthur Conan Doyle version.
Sure.
So the answer is I don't know the Hound of the Baskerville.
All right.
Well, no worries. I got other ones for you. I've got another kind of interpretive one. It's from Having Fung. Okay. I'm just gonna read it as it was written because it's good. So, okay.
I think I saw this already.
Yeah, this is a kind of off-topic question for Kristina, but I would love to hear if this story fits in with any existing crimey legends. So, and then gives a legend here, which is, so my friend
I'm not
told
sure if
me...
you can hear me. You froze. I'm not hearing you. Okay.
Oh, can you hear me now?
I think that's...
Oh. I can hear you.
We can hear you.
I can hear you, Kristina.
You guys hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Yeah.
Daisy, is that in the if Kristina can't hear you, Daisy, is that in the Folkwise Gmail?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Wait, are you back? Are you back?
You guys are coming in and out. Every now and then for a second I got a thing saying that the stream was unstable, but that has gone away now.
Oh wow.
Okay. Let us know if something else happens like that, and I can type a question for you and you can answer it when you come back in, perhaps. I have taken all of the questions we got and put them in a document.
All right.
Okay.
So I did not hear that last question.
Okay, that's okay. So it's a kind of off-topic question for you.
Mm-hmm.
This was posted in the chat, and Having Fung says, I would love to hear if the story fits in with any existing crimey legends. So a friend told me a story a few years ago. This girl she knew went on a Tinder date with a guy. He was kind of weird, cooked her a dinner at his house, and she ended up in the hospital later with some horrible infection that can only be caught from consuming human flesh.
Da da da!
The police tried to track him down and he vanished without a trace. It sounded a lot like a legend, and I would love to hear if it's related to anything existing already that's related to crime and legends.
So that is absolutely a legend, and that is also not to say that it didn't happen, because that's a point that legend scholars have to make all the time of like, just because it's a legend doesn't mean it didn't also happen to someone you know.
Yeah.
Yes, that is absolutely a legend. A lot of times this happens to a girl who's on vacation in Mexico, and it's a worker at the resort that she goes on a date with who cooks her some kind of traditional dish, and then she gets back to the States. So a lot of times there are some kind of like racist, xenophobic elements in there of like, oh, it's these foreign guys that are going to feed you human flesh, and kind of this clear message of good girls don't date guys that serve them human flesh.
Yeah, and also kind of.
I'm wondering if the.
Oh, sorry.
I
I
was
was
wondering
gonna.
if the social sanction is
Go
the
for it.
like Tinder date thing of like. Sorry, we keep cutting each other off. Sorry, Dom.
That's cool. I was gonna say, and also like the added. This is me coming as like a food waste thing. The added like good white girls eat chicken that they wash off in the sink that comes from the factory farm. Not, because you were saying like on vacation, I had this dish I've never had before. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, you're getting this like idea of culinary tourism that kind of allows you to sample the other. Literally, yeah. Cool.
Ha!
Yeah. I don't know of any actual true crime stories.
Interesting. I mean, there's cannibal true crime stuff, but this is not the same as like
Yeah.
inviting you over and then getting ended up in the hospital with an infection from eating human flesh. That's pretty bonkers. Okay, well, I have more here. This is from our dear friend and also fellow folklorist, Lydia. Perhaps a controversial
Lydia.
question, but do you, Dr. K, consider the folklore around serial killers to be generated by the criminals themselves, by fans of serial killer history, or both?
I would say both. I'd say in most cases it's more kind of the fans mixed with media, and media is considering including both like television journalism and then just like true crime books and that sort of thing, as well as podcasts. But you do have some like the Zodiac Killer, for example, was definitely trying to build a mythos around himself.
Yeah.
Possibly also you get a little bit of that with like the Texarkana Phantom. Trying to think of some others. There's definitely Son of Sam. Though Son of Sam, he may have been also kind of trying to do that to create an insanity plea for himself.
Do you think
So
that
yeah,
like
it's kind of a mix.
Charles Manson was doing that?
I think Charles Manson really believed all of the stuff. I
Yeah,
don't know
'cause
that he was trying to create a thing about himself as a killer as much as he was like actually trying to create a race war.
I guess
thought that
that's
he would
true.
do.
I guess he just was like he was trying to spread the word, so to speak,
Right.
That was a
create
bad
a
word.
race war, less so try to create a name for himself as a serial killer. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, interesting.
He didn't actually participate in any of the murders, did he? He
No.
wasn't even there, I don't think.
No. I don't yeah, I think people did it on behalf of him. So interesting. Well, I have more for you. Where we got? Which one? We got a question from What the Folklore, who is our friend Kate Schramm in the chat. What up?
Can't.
I'd also be interested in your takes on conspiracy theory thinking. How far is the jump between trying to solve true crime and acting on far out conspiracies?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because you certainly, as I said, sometimes on the forums you'll read these really outlandish theories explaining, how, certain crimes took place or were carried out or, whatever. And there are sometimes overlaps with some of the things that you'll see in some of the conspiracy theories that are very much in vogue these days, including things like pedophile rings and like that. I think that well, I don't know. Recent events are making me question the words that are about to come out of my mouth. But by and large, I think there's a pretty big gap between reading, formulating, and perhaps entertaining a conspiracy theory and then actually acting something out, like going into a pizza parlor and firing a gun because you think there are children being kept in the basement. I will say my co-host, Jesse Fivecoat, has actually written about this. So he would be a good person to talk to more about this.
It's making me think about like ostension, right? Because there's like I guess like at what point ostension requires the action, right? You have to act on behalf of the legend to either recreate it for yourself or because you're subconsciously influenced by believing in the legend. And I'm wondering like if you just read it online and believe it, is that different in terms of ostension than, going into the pizza parlor with a gun?
Yes, I think it's very different.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it is different, but I mean, in terms of like
Yeah.
ostension, like are both ostension? I guess is what I'm wondering.
Right.
No, right? I think it has the action part is the ostension, and before
I
that,
was
it's
going to
just
say, I think, yeah, I think so.
okay.
Yeah.
But there was something I was going to say, and it's totally slipped my brain.
Well, can
I'm
I
going to blame that on COVID brain.
kind of address what Daisy said then,
Yeah.
if I may?
Yes.
So I think the
Absolutely.
big thing that hooks a lot of people into conspiracy theories is not necessarily like the doing or the solving like true crime, but I think it's more of like the belonging. And I think it's like a lot of these like true crime a lot of these like conspiracy groups online are exactly that, where it's like a lot of people who like want to belong in a group that knows these things and also belong in a group where people like they believe they're right about something no one else knows, and eventually people are going to come to them and be like, "Oh, you were right. This is the in group I wanted to join." So you're talking about like that and ostension. I already can't remember the definitions if that's pseudo ostension or what, but yeah, I think there's a difference between like how most people come to conspiracy communities wanting to wanting to like yeah, like be right and wanting to like learn the right thing and like have the secret right knowledge, where I think there when we talk about like or amateur sleuths or something, a lot of people there's a lot more people wanting to do the doing rather than just to do the belonging.
Right. And one thing that early on in this, when I was talking about citizen detectives, I said, there needs to be some kind of limit somehow or another. And I don't know how, and their forums have specific limit, like there are forums that will say, you can't dox anybody here, you can't, whatever. What happened with the Boston Marathon bombing, how it went so horribly wrong, is it was happening so fast, the moderators could not keep up and remove things as
Yeah.
fast as they needed to.
Yeah.
And that's, a danger. But I would say, when there's a difference between going, okay, I think we have figured out that this person from this surveillance image that's been released is this person. We can contact the FBI and tell them it's that person, versus contacting the family of that person and saying, I'm going to kill you because your son is a terrorist.
Yeah.
That's where the line gets from. And, in that case, these people who thought they were being citizen detectives absolutely kind of crossed the line more into the acting on conspiracy theories thing. So it absolutely can happen. Um, I have not seen it happen often, but I think it's a thing people need to guard against a lot.
That makes a lot of sense to me.
That was a tough question and a good answer, Kristina. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like sitting here thinking like, dang.
I say it's honestly
True.
probably the thing I'm going to keep thinking about.
Yeah.
So,
No, it's an
good
interesting question.
Who asked that, Kate?
Is
Yeah.
that Kate?
Good
Mhm.
question, Kate.
Nice. It's a thinker. Okay, I've got another one for you from Pies Kill Kings. Not sure which one of you sent this one in
Again.
or posted this one. But the question is, how do you think the television show Unsolved Mysteries influences citizen crime solvers for better or worse? And do you think it encourages voyeurism?
Ooh.
I missed the very first part of that question.
Okay. It's from Pies Kill Kings, who's been blowing up the chat with great questions, both on email and in the chat. The question is, how do you think the television show Unsolved Mysteries influences citizen crime solvers for better or worse? And do you think it encourages voyeurism?
So I think you'll hear a lot of people say that that's kind of their starting point. people, especially that are like in my age range, that watching Unsolved Mysteries and America's Most Wanted as kids was kind of what got them in. That was the thing that sucked them in, and it, got them into reading more and more about true crime, and then thinking, oh yeah, um, there's maybe something we can do to be active, not just read these things. Um, and I think, voyeurism is always an aspect of true crime. It's a thing I try to always be really mindful of. I remember reading an interview with the brother of a young woman whose murder was turned into a novel that then became a bestseller, and the novelist made a lot of money off of it. And he said basically, she can go straight to hell. She turned my sister's death into a thing that made her rich. And I don't think that was an intentional thing. I think it was just writers have the idea of like a well-stocked pond, and you draw on, what's out there, and you can see how it could easily happen that this is just a thing I find interesting, and it's very easy sometimes to forget that there are real people still connected. And I think there is always a little bit of a voyeuristic aspect to it. I think it's really important for both viewers and creators to keep that in mind, and to, again, kind of be sensitive to the fact that there are real people involved in these. These aren't just legends. These aren't just fictional narratives. And I don't, again, we all have our own lines, and we all draw them in different places. I, for example, think that there are images of crime scenes or videos of things that maybe don't need to be all over the internet or the television. And that doesn't mean that it's not a good thing that they exist, because I think having that video sometimes is really important evidence, and keeps people honest that need to be kept honest. But I don't know that it needs to be played on the television 24/7, because I just think about, if that was my loved one, how would I feel? I remember reading an interview with the mother of the baby that was in the famous image after the Oklahoma City bombing, of the firefighter carrying the babies, that I think was still alive but eventually died. And she said, every anniversary, that picture was plastered over everything, and I couldn't go to the grocery store without seeing my murdered child. Uh, and so, whereas for America, this was a symbol of this horrible thing that had happened to us, and we had risen above it, and, whatever. But for her, this was just her baby that got murdered. And so I think there is definitely a voyeuristic aspect. It's inescapable, but I just think you need to be aware of it, and cautious about how you talk about things, what images you use, if you're working with a visual medium, things like that.
I've got a question for you that builds on this. This is straight from my own noggin.
Ooh.
Um, Thinking about like this kind of voyeurism and sort of the thresholds for people, like where it can become hurtful or perhaps uh perpetuating grief. Like, what do you think about museums in terms of voyeurism? I'm thinking specifically about the Museum of Death in LA. There's also one in New Orleans, but I have been to that museum 2 or 3 times, and this museum covers a wide range of death and death related practices, like anything from burial and cremation to like how people die in prison to things like serial killers. And they have like an entire room dedicated to true crime and serial killers. And when you go to this museum, it is incredibly voyeuristic about the death experience in all of these different ways, depending on like the themes of the rooms. I'm just curious, like, that's a very specific example, but thinking about the relationship between museums, voyeurism, and death, like, is there a line that you can cross in your mind about what's too voyeuristic and when you're not really learning and educating yourself, but rather just like looking in, being a voyeur, being curious?
Yeah. And it's kind of one of those, like, I can't necessarily tell you what the line is, but I can tell you when it's been crossed. And there is almost inevitably a voyeuristic aspect to museums. And I don't think it's a bad thing that we have museums dealing with really dark and really difficult subject matter. Uh, one like example I'll go of a museum I've been to is the Civil Rights Museum in Memphis, and that is at the site of the hotel where Martin Luther King was assassinated.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And you the last thing you go through during the main part of the building is the hotel room, which is you don't walk through the hotel room, but you walk by glass that has the hotel room set up exactly as his hotel room was set up, and you can see the spot on the walkway where he was killed. And then you can go across the street to the boarding house where James Earl Ray um, was hiding, and through the window that he fired the gun from. And I will say, looking through that window was the most unpleasant experience I've ever had in a museum, but it was also a really kind of visceral, powerful um, moment to appreciate how important that site was and what had happened there,
Yeah.
because it was then surrounded by all of this, information about the civil rights movement in general and Martin Luther King and his assassination and all of that. So I think that's a thing that was incredibly voyeuristic, but also really powerful and a really good educational experience. I've heard critiques of the Holocaust Museum and the fact that there's these photos of uh, prisoners in the camps that clearly don't want to be photographed,
Mm-hmm.
and yet those photos are now being used as a way of memorializing them. And uh, you know, there is a balance there. I think it's right that we all be horrified by the Holocaust, but I don't know where exactly. I think it's a valid critique, and I also understand the reason for using those images. It's one of those things I can see both sides of. Um, but I have also seen things. I mean, I haven't been to the Museum of Death. I haven't been to some of these things, but I have seen images and read about places that are definitely kind of fetishizing it more. That it's more for entertainment than education. And again, I'm not going to pretend that there's not an entertainment aspect to my own engagement with true crime. But I don't know. I just think you have to, again, it's one of those, there's a line, and I can't tell you where the line is, but I can tell you when, sometimes when you see something, you're like, oh, okay, that's a little
Yeah,
gross.
Mm-hmm.
absolutely. Okay, it's about 11, and if you would like more questions, I have two more questions. One is a clarification from an earlier question, and then another one is unrelated. How you feeling? Want to keep going with
Sure.
questions?
Yeah. Good.
Okay. So the clarification from earlier is about the Hound of Baskerville.
Okay.
And so this is good, and I think it actually is this is a very interesting question. So here is Mario asked the question in the chat and says the story revolves around a person being terrified of a black dog from hell, as we thought, and the end of the story reveals spoilers that the dog
spoilers for this old ass book.
yeah. The end of the story reveals that the dog was a mortal flesh and bone dog trained by the real villain of the story. Then they go on to say that the way that they should have clarified or phrased the question was more along the lines of how often do we find Scooby-Doo crimes in which people believe something supernatural is to blame before finding the human behind the mask?
I would say not that often, actually, especially not present day. There are some fascinating cases from 100 years ago or more of ghosts testifying in criminal trials and things like that. I don't even know, that's not even really a Scooby-Doo crime. I'm just trying to think of
that's more like Harvey
cases where we have
Birdman.
something to go- yeah
Yeah, I guess the scenario more is about people believing
there's
that
something that
something
looks supernatural but isn't.
yeah.
Yeah.
Like first it's supernatural and then they realize it's human.
Mhm.
I mean, I think that happens in legend. I don't know if that happens with crimes a lot. I've been in situations where my manager at an antique store, my first job ever was at an antique store, and she used to think that like a person was smoking in the back room, like because somebody had apparently died in the back room before it was the antique store, and that his ghost was like the smell was coming from the ghost, right? Like indicating that he was back there, but really it's like just a draft from a vent upstairs, which was
Mm.
an apartment complex. And so like first we thought it was something supernatural before we thought it was human, but that's not really a crime,
Yeah.
you know.
What I and like this is a crime, though this is not like as far I'm aware of, and as far as I'm aware of, in none of these instances was the person deliberately trying to make it look like it was something supernatural. But I have heard cases where people thought they had a haunted house, and it actually turned out there was someone living in their attic.
Oh, I've heard one of those too.
Oh my god.
It was the basement when I heard it, but yeah.
Okay. And as I'm saying this, like I've heard these in context where I 100% believe that they're accurate, and I can't give you any specifics, which means that I might have been hearing legends.
Yeah, yeah.
I think that I'm fairly positive this is a thing that has actually happened.
Well, I also wonder, like, it's part of that like disbelief, right? Like it's
Mhm.
so unbelievable that it must be true. And sometimes it is true. Like I bet that actually happened at one time ever. And then like everybody tells the legend now because it's just so unbelievable. Or they're maybe not, maybe I shouldn't say tells the legend as much as tries to retell this unbelievable story that they heard, and it ends up sounding different than what actually had happened because it's just so wild. It's so unbelievable. So I wonder if that's part of it.
Right.
Do we know? Oh, we got another question in the chat real fast. Wasn't Parasite based on a true story?
Oh, that's because we're talking about being afraid of people living in the basement, being afraid of people
Right.
living in the vents, which I can only say you watched Die Hard when you were too young, but yeah. The Denver Spider. Someone put a link about the Denver Spider-Man. Do you know this,
Yeah,
Kristina?
the Denver Spider-Man. Yes. Yeah.
Talk about that.
Yeah. Yes. So the gist of it is basically that an old man I think his wife was hospitalized or something. He was in the house alone for an extended period of time, and he was found murdered. And they could not find the culprit. It was one of those lock room mysteries kind of thing, like all
Yeah.
of the doors were locked from the inside. And then I think someone else was attacked in the house as well. Maybe his wife came back and she was attacked there. But basically, come to find out that a guy that they had known in passing had been living in their attic, and he had some kind of medical condition. He was incredibly emaciated and was able to squeeze through a little like trapdoor into the attic that nobody would have thought somebody could squeeze through. And so for a long time, there were all these rumors in the neighborhood of people would be like, "Oh yeah, I saw this creepy face at the window," and all of this. And it turned out there was in fact actually a guy living in.
Oh my gosh.
That's Reverse Parasite. Spoilers for Parasite, a movie that's a year old. But that's Reverse Parasite.
Well, there you go.
All right, I've got another question for you. And really, this question is good and we can answer it. But there are people that are scheduled to be on the show that will do a better job of answering it.
Okay.
But we can take a stab at it. You'll see this is a pun in a moment.
Oh boy.
Would we consider the Slenderman stabbings years ago to be ostension?
Yes.
I think yes.
Literally how I used to teach ostension to my students. Yeah, that the textbook example.
There you go.
Yeah.
That was easier than I thought it was.
Who asked that? Who asked that?
Oh man.
Do they say? Do they want to be identified? I'll
that's
say
the only one I didn't copy the name.
Okay,
with.
I say whoever asked that, A+, S tier. You did it.
Yeah.
You've been paying attention. There will be a quiz. There will be a quiz next week, but you've been paying attention.
Oh, it's Pies Kill Kings.
Oh.
So I bet
Lydia.
James? Lydia? James?
Lydia.
One of you two?
James.
Lydia, yeah. Yeah.
Cool.
Well, anyway, yes. Okay, I have a question that has nothing to do with true crime, really, but does have to do with folklore and our show. So, Christina, feel free to stay on if you want to keep chatting with us about the random questions we might get, but that's all we had. That's all we have for you specifically, unless somebody posts like 10 questions in the chat right now.
Well, thank you guys so much for having me on.
Oh,
thank you
Christina,
for
it was a
joining
pleasure.
us.
It was so much fun, Christina.
So cool. We're so happy that you could make it with us today. This is awesome. I think the people loved it. The chat was really going off. Feel free to go back and read the chat if you'd like. There's going to be a highlight reel that's just the interview that we'll post on YouTube as well. And so send that around. Tell your students you were on a show. Tell people in your life that you were on a show. It's very cool.
Yeah, I see. Thank you,
But
Christina, in the chat. Everyone thank Christina in the chat. At least give her a GG's.
Yes, good games, good games.
Good games, good games, good games.
GG's. Yeah, and don't forget to go to Crimelore Podcast. You can find that at crimelorepod.com. I'll post a link again.
Or wherever your pods are cast.
Yeah. And you can check it out there. There's some great episodes. You can watch them right now if you wanted.
Yeah.
Well, you can't watch them, but you can listen to them.
Well, listen.
Well, yeah, yeah.
That's true.
I only point this out because there was a family member of mine who called me when he tried to listen to the first, or when he tried to watch the first episode, and he was like, "I can't get the video to work."
No,
Oh, no.
There is no video, so you're doing it right.
Classics.